All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're going to unpack a really powerful idea from the social theorist David Harvey, the idea that capitalism's huge, dramatic crises aren't just random accidents, but are actually part of its core design.
So let's start with a question that, let's be honest, has been on a lot of our minds, especially since the giant financial crash of 2008. Why does it feel like our economic system is always lurching from one massive crisis to the next?
Well, the geographer David Harvey has a pretty provocative answer. He argues that crises aren't some kind of bug in the system that we need to fix. Nope. He says they're actually a fundamental feature, a necessary part of how capitalism is forced to reinvent itself over and over again.
So, first things first, let's just establish that these huge economic blowups aren't just random one-off events. They're actually a pattern that repeats itself throughout history.
I mean, when you look back, the pattern is kind of hard to miss. You've got the Great Depression in 29, the stagflation crisis of the 70s, Japan's massive bubble bursting in the 90s, and of course, the global meltdown of 2008. It seems like a major crisis hits almost once a generation.
And this brings us to the core question, the big idea we're wrestling with here. Are these just unfortunate glitches that we need to try and patch up? Or, as Harvey suggests, are they actually essential features of the economic engine itself, driving it forward through these moments of chaos and destruction?
Okay, so if crises are features, not bugs, then what is it about this engine that makes it so prone to breaking down? Harvey's big idea is that the engine is powered by what he calls contradictions. Now, when Harvey uses the word contradiction, he's not talking about a logic puzzle where something is impossible. It's more like two forces that are pulling in opposite directions, but both are totally essential to how the system works. Kind of like the constant tug of war between your work life and your family life. You need both, but they're always creating this tension you have to manage.
He's got this fantastic metaphor to make it stick. Think of capitalism as this massive cruise ship. We can spend all our time looking at the parties and the shuffleboard games up on deck, but Harvey says, no. To understand why the ship keeps shuddering and breaking down, you have to go down into the engine room. That's where the real action is, where these powerful, contradictory forces are churning away. So to make this less abstract and more real, let's zero in on the first, and maybe the most important contradiction. And we'll use an example we can all understand, a simple house. So every house kind of has this split identity, right? On one hand, it's got what Harvey calls use value. It's your home, it's shelter, security, a place to build a life. But, and this is the crucial part, in our economy, it also has an exchange value. It's a financial asset and investment to be bought and sold for profit. And this is where the rubber meets the road. The problem kicks in when that relentless chase for more exchange value, for higher prices and bigger profits, starts to completely trample the basic, fundamental human need for use value. You know, a place to actually live. And this is basically the anatomy of the 2008 housing bubble. You see how it works? It starts with something simple, a family needing a home. But then speculation just pours gasoline on the fire. Suddenly their house isn't just a home, it's like a chip in a casino, and they're being told to borrow against it to buy even more chips. And this wasn't just some fringe thing happening. Michael Lewis, in his incredible book, The Big Short, tells this wild story about a nanny who, along with her sister, got totally swept up in this whole thing. They ended up owning 5 houses and a condo, all through this exact cycle of refinancing and speculating.
So, when this giant bubble of exchange value finally popped, what was the human cost?
That number, that's how many families lost their homes to foreclosure, just in the US crisis alone. They were chasing the dream of exchange value, and in the end, they tragically lost the one thing that actually mattered, the use value of their home. The contradiction resolved itself in the most brutal way imaginable. But here's the thing. The housing crisis wasn't an isolated event. It was just the first domino to fall. So let's zoom out now and see how that one contradiction is plugged into a whole chain of others that are churning away in capitalism's engine room. Okay, so it all kicks off with that core tension we just talked about, that conflict between a house as a home versus a house as a financial asset. But for that kind of crazy speculation to even be possible, you need a financial system that can basically create money out of thin air as debt. Harvey has a name for this, fictitious capital. And that's our second contradiction, the tension between all this debt we're creating today and our very uncertain ability to actually pay it back tomorrow. And this whole game, the whole system of buying and selling these assets, it's all built on one foundational idea: private property. But there's another tension right there. Because while a house is owned privately, its value is often created collectively by things like public schools, roads, and the community around it.
And at the end of the day, those private property rights aren't just magical ideas. They are backed up by the power of the state. And this brings up a final contradiction: the tension between the idea of a free market that runs itself and the reality that it can't even exist without the massive coercive power of the state enforcing all the rules.
So you see what's happening here? Harvey isn't just listing a bunch of separate problems. It's all one interconnected, really unstable system. The tension between use and exchange value, the nature of our money, the idea of private property, and the role of the state, they're all tangled up together.
And this is maybe the most crucial takeaway from Harvey's whole analysis. The system almost never solves these contradictions. Instead, a crisis just forces the pressure to move somewhere else. So, housing crisis gets fixed and suddenly becomes a government debt crisis. The tension is simply shifted, setting the stage for the next breakdown somewhere else down the line.
And that leaves us with one final and kinda unsettling thought to chew on. If these powerful internal contradictions are just a permanent part of our economic system, then the real question isn't if we'll see another crisis. The question is, where's the pressure building up right now, and where will it show up next?